In the vast expanse of the Galactic Federation, where 1,000 civilized species had found peace through diplomacy and careful negotiation, there existed an unspoken truth that chilled even the bravest warriors to their cores. It wasn't about the ancient war machines buried on dead worlds, or the cosmic horrors that lurked in the void between stars. It was about a small, blue planet on the edge of the Milky Way, inhabited by a species so terrifyingly unpredictable that even mentioning their name in military circles would cause seasoned generals to pause and reconsider their strategies. They called themselves humans. And, today, for the first time in galactic history, the Federation was about to witness what happened when you cornered one of them. The observation deck of the Federation battleship Harmony's Edge hummed with quiet efficiency as dozens of alien dignitaries gathered to witness what their intelligence reports had promised would be a routine subjugation. General Calthor of the Zentari Empire stood at the center of the viewing platform, his forearms crossed behind his back as he gazed through the massive transparent aluminum viewport at the small blue world spinning lazily below. Primitive, muttered Commander Vextai, her serpentine features twisted in what passed for amusement among her species. Look at their cities, General. No energy shields, no orbital defense platforms. They're still burning fossil fuels on half their continents. General Calthor nodded, though something deep in his veteran warrior's instincts whispered warnings he couldn't quite place. In his 3 centuries of military service, he had overseen the peaceful integration of 47 worlds into the Federation. Each time, the process followed the same predictable pattern: make contact, demonstrate superior technology, allow the local population time to accept their new reality, then welcome them into galactic civilization. Clean, efficient, civilized. The humans have been monitoring our communications for the past 6 months, reported Lieutenant ZSS Keck from his position at the sensor array. His insectoid compound eyes reflected the soft blue glow of his instruments. They know we're here, and they know why we've come. Standard protocol suggests they should have sent diplomatic envoys by now. Perhaps they're still debating among themselves, suggested Dr. Yathara, the expedition's chief xenopsychologist. Her crystalline form chimed softly as she moved closer to the viewport. Our cultural analysis indicates they have over 200 separate governmental entities on their planet. Reaching consensus might take considerable time. General Calthor studied the planet below with growing unease. The humans had indeed been silent for 6 months, ever since the Federation's first contact probe had delivered the standard message: surrender peacefully and join the galactic community, or face the consequences of continued resistance. Every other species in recorded history had chosen the former within weeks. The humans, however, had simply acknowledged the message and then nothing. General, called out sensor technician Mordun, I'm detecting some unusual activity in their northern hemisphere. Large-scale construction projects, increased electromagnetic emissions, and... He paused, his tentacles writhing with confusion, significant population movements toward underground facilities. Underground? General Calthor's primary eyes focused sharply on the technician. Elaborate. It appears they're moving their civilian populations into subterranean complexes. Massive ones, sir. Our deep scan sensors indicate they've been excavating for months, creating networks of tunnels and bunkers across all major population centers. Commander Vextai laughed, a sound like grinding metal. They're hiding. The poor primitives think they can wait us out underground like some kind of burrowing animals. But General Calthor wasn't laughing. His warrior's instincts, honed by decades of combat, were screaming danger signals that his logical mind couldn't process. Species that went underground usually did so for one of 2 reasons: to hide, or to prepare for war. And something about the humans' methodical silence suggested the latter. Sir, Lieutenant Ziasiskek's voice carried a note of confusion, I'm picking up a transmission from the planet. It's unusual. Put it through the universal translator and route it to the main display. The massive holographic projector at the center of the observation deck flickered to life, revealing the image of a single human male. He appeared to be middle-aged by their species standards, with graying hair and deeply lined features that spoke of stress and sleepless nights. He wore what appeared to be a simple military uniform, adorned with symbols and insignia that the Federation's computers couldn't immediately decode. People of the Galactic Federation, the human began, his voice carrying across the silent observation deck. My name is General Marcus Chen, speaking on behalf of the United Earth Defense Coalition. 6 months ago, you demanded our surrender. 6 months ago, you gave us a choice: submit to your authority or face the consequences of resistance. The human's eyes seemed to look directly through the camera, and General Calthor felt an unexpected chill run down his spine. We have made our choice. The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the observation deck in stunned silence. General Calthor stared at the empty hologram projection, processing what he had just witnessed. In 3 centuries of military service, he had never encountered a species that responded to Federation contact with such directness. That's it? Commander Vextai's voice dripped with disdain. No demands? No negotiations? No pleading for mercy? Just we have made our choice? What kind of diplomatic response is that? Dr. Ythera's crystalline form resonated with a low, worried tone. General, I believe we may have underestimated this species' psychological profile. The human's body language, vocal patterns, and choice of words suggest. Suggest what, Doctor? Suggest that they've been preparing for war from the moment we made contact. Before General Calthor could respond, every alarm on the ship began blaring simultaneously. The observation deck's emergency lighting bathed everything in pulsing red as Lieutenant Zieskek's voice cut through the chaos. General! Multiple contacts rising from the planet's surface. Energy signatures are impossible. Elaborate, Lieutenant. Sir, I'm reading fusion rockets, antimatter drives, and something else I can't identify. The energy output is comparable to our own technology, but the designs are completely alien to anything in the Federation database. General Calthor felt his blood turn to ice. How many contacts? 12, 20, sir. I'm reading over 50 separate vessels and the number is still climbing. Through the observation deck's viewports, the assembled dignitaries watched in stunned silence as points of brilliant light began rising from the blue world below. The ships that emerged from Earth's atmosphere bore no resemblance to the sleek, elegant designs favored by Federation technology. These vessels were angular, brutal-looking constructs that seemed designed for one purpose and one purpose alone: war. Impossible, whispered Commander Vextai, her earlier confidence evaporating. Our intelligence reports indicated they were centuries away from spaceflight capability. How could they have developed interstellar technology in 6 months? Dr. Ythera's form chimed with realization and growing horror. They didn't develop it in 6 months. Our cultural analysis was incomplete. We assumed their technological development followed standard patterns, but what if? She paused, her crystalline structure flickering with rapid calculations. What if they've been deliberately hiding their true capabilities? The implications hit General Calthor like a physical blow. A species that could successfully deceive Federation intelligence gathering. A species that could build a hidden spacefleet while maintaining the appearance of primitive civilization. A species that responded to first contact not with wonder or fear, but with methodical preparation for war. Sir! Lieutenant Zieskek's voice cracked with stress. The human vessels are taking aggressive formations. They're not attempting to flee the system, they're moving to engage. How is their technology compared to ours? General Calthor demanded. I'm not sure, sir. Their energy signatures are unlike anything in our database. Some of their ships are showing power outputs that rival our dreadnoughts, but they're using completely unknown propulsion and weapons systems. Through the viewport, the human fleet continued to emerge from their planet's gravity well. Each ship was a testament to a completely different philosophy of warfare than anything the Federation had encountered. Where Federation vessels were designed with smooth curves and artistic elegance, these human ships were all angles and armor plating. Where Federation technology emphasized efficiency and multifunctionality, these vessels seemed purpose-built for destruction. General, Dr. Ythera's voice carried a tremor that sent chills through the assembled observers. I believe we need to reconsider our approach to this species immediately. Everything in their ship design, their response to our contact, their preparatory behavior, it suggests a level of military capability and strategic thinking that goes far beyond anything we've encountered in previous first contact scenarios.
Are you suggesting they're a threat to the Federation? Commander Vextai demanded, though her earlier arrogance had been replaced by growing uncertainty.
I'm suggesting, Dr. Yuthara replied carefully, that we may be looking at a species that has been preparing for interstellar warfare since long before we made contact. A species that saw our arrival not as an opportunity for peaceful integration, but as the beginning of a war they intended to fight and win. The observation deck fell silent except for the steady rhythm of alarm systems and sensor readings. General Calfor watched the human fleet continue its methodical deployment, and, for the first time in his long military career, he felt something he had never experienced when facing a primitive world: genuine uncertainty about the outcome.
Sir, Lieutenant Zskek reported with growing alarm, the human fleet has completed its formation. They're requesting communication. Put them through.
The holographic display activated again, but this time it showed not a single human but what appeared to be a military command center filled with dozens of them. The same general from the earlier transmission stood at the center, but now he was surrounded by officers working at complex control stations that looked disturbingly advanced for a supposedly primitive species.
General Calfor of the Zentari Empire, the human general said, somehow knowing exactly who he was addressing. I am General Marcus Chen of the United Earth Defense Coalition. You came to our world offering us a choice: surrender or face the consequences. We chose neither. The human's eyes hardened, and, when he spoke again, his voice carried a weight that made every being in the observation deck step back involuntarily. We chose to fight. And now you're going to discover why, in all your centuries of peaceful integration, you've never encountered a species like humanity before. The transmission ended, and General Calfor found himself staring at a tactical situation unlike anything in his experience. 50 human warships hung in formation between his fleet and their homeworld, weapons powered and shields raised. Not hiding, not fleeing, not begging for mercy, but preparing to engage the most powerful military force in the galaxy. And, for the first time in 3 centuries of military service, General Calfor realized he had no idea who was going to win. The first human weapons fired before General Calfor's sensors could even register the attack was coming. What struck the Federation battleship Harmony's edge wasn't the elegant energy beams or plasma bolts that characterized civilized warfare throughout the galaxy. Instead, chunks of metal traveling at significant fractions of light speed slammed into the ship's shields with such kinetic force that the entire vessel shuddered despite its massive size.
Report! General Calfor barked as emergency lights bathed the observation deck in crimson.
Direct hit on our forward shields. Lieutenant Zskek's compound eyes were wide with shock.
But, sir, I didn't detect any energy discharge from the human vessels.
No plasma buildup, no particle beam emission, nothing.
Then, how did they? The second salvo answered his question as the main tactical display showed dozens of small projectiles streaking toward the Federation fleet at velocities that should have been impossible for primitive kinetic weapons. The computer analysis scrolled across the screen in real time: solid metal slugs, each one the size of a small starfighter, accelerated by magnetic fields to devastating speeds. They're using mass drivers, Dr. Yuthara observed, her crystalline form chiming with what might have been admiration or terror.
Kinetic weapons on a scale we've never seen before.
They're not trying to punch through our shields with energy, they're trying to overwhelm them with pure momentum. Commander Vextai hissed in frustration as she watched her own vessel, the Pride of Selterra, take multiple hits from the human kinetic barrage. Primitive weapons. Our shields can handle. Her words were cut off as one of the massive metal projectiles punched clean through the Pride of Selterra's weakened shields and tore a hole through the ship's hull large enough for a shuttle to fly through.
Atmosphere vented into space in a glittering cloud of frozen gases and debris.
Impossible, Commander Vextai whispered. Those are just chunks of metal.
How can they penetrate military-grade deflector shields?
Because, General Calfor said grimly, understanding dawning in his voice, they're not just chunks of metal. They're smart chunks of metal.
The tactical display confirmed his suspicions as the computer analysis updated.
Each kinetic projectile was equipped with guidance systems, course correction thrusters, and what appeared to be adaptive warheads designed to modify their impact characteristics based on the target they encountered.
Sir, Lieutenant ZSS Keck reported with growing alarm, the human projectiles are coordinating their attacks. They're hitting the same shield sections in sequence, systematically overwhelming our defensive systems through focused fire patterns. Through the observation deck's viewports, the assembled alien dignitaries watched the human fleet continue their relentless kinetic bombardment.
But what terrified them more than the weapons themselves was the methodical precision with which they were being employed. This wasn't the desperate flailing of a primitive species suddenly thrust into space combat. This was the calculated aggression of a military force that had spent considerable time studying Federation tactics and developing specific counters to them.
General.
The voice belonged to Captain T.H. Rax of the Federation cruiser Swift Justice. His image appeared on the communication display, and his usually composed Hytherian features were twisted with panic.
We're reading massive energy buildup from the human homeworld. Something big is charging up down there.
General Calthor's tactical display shifted to show Earth's surface, where massive installations were emerging from what had appeared to be empty wilderness just moments before. Camouflaged weapon platforms the size of cities were rising from concealed positions, their energy signatures building toward levels that made the ship's computers emit warning chimes.
Those aren't recent constructions, Dr. Ythera observed with growing horror.
The structural analysis suggests they've been building those installations for decades, possibly longer. They've been preparing for this war since before we even knew they existed. The first planetary defense cannon fired, and General Calthor finally understood why every instinct he possessed had been screaming warnings since the moment they arrived at Earth. The beam that lanced up from the planet's surface wasn't the coherent energy discharge typical of galactic civilization. Instead, it was something far more terrifying, a focused stream of exotic particles that ignored conventional deflector shields entirely and struck the Federation dreadnought Eternal Wisdom with the force of a small star. The massive warship, pride of the Kaelian Navy and veteran of a dozen peacekeeping operations, simply ceased to exist.
One moment it was there, its kilometers-long hull gleaming in the light of Earth's sun.
The next moment, there was nothing but expanding debris and the fading glow of catastrophic energy release.
What kind of weapon was that?
Commander Vextai's voice was barely a whisper.
Unknown exotic particle stream, Lieutenant ZSS Keck reported, his voice cracking with stress.
Computer analysis indicates it was some kind of focused antimatter discharge, but the containment and delivery system is unlike anything in the Federation database. General Calthor felt ice forming in his veins as he processed the implications.
The humans hadn't just developed space travel in secret.
They hadn't just built a hidden fleet of warships. They had somehow leapfrogged past Federation technology entirely, developing weapons systems that the galaxy's most advanced civilizations couldn't even identify, much less defend against.
Sir! Captain T.H. Rax's voice cut through the observation deck's stunned silence. The human fleet is changing formation. They're not maintaining defensive positions, they're advancing on our location.
Through the viewport, General Calthor could see the human warships moving with a coordination that spoke of extensive training and preparation.
Their formation wasn't the elegant, symmetrical patterns favored by Federation naval doctrine.
Instead, it was something altogether more sinister, an aggressive wedge designed to focus maximum firepower on specific targets while maintaining overlapping fields of defensive coverage. They're using wolf pack tactics, he realized aloud. Coordinated hunting patterns designed to isolate and destroy superior individual vessels through combined attacks.
But that's...
Dr. Ythera's form flickered with rapid calculations.
That's not how spacefaring species fight wars.
Galactic naval doctrine has evolved over millennia to emphasize individual ship combat and defensive formations. These humans are employing tactical concepts that go against everything we know about space warfare.
Maybe, General Calthor said quietly, that's exactly why they're winning. The human fleet struck like a pack of predators that had been studying their prey for months.
Instead of engaging in the formal ship-to-ship duels that characterized Federation military doctrine, they swarmed individual vessels with multiple attackers, overwhelming shields and defenses through coordinated strikes that no single ship could withstand. The Federation cruiser Diplomatic Dawn found itself facing 5 human warships simultaneously. Its captain, following standard protocol, attempted to engage the closest enemy vessel in single combat while maneuvering to avoid the others. The humans, however, had no interest in honorable duels. All 5 ships opened fire at once, their kinetic weapons creating a crossfire pattern that made evasive maneuvers impossible.
Within minutes, the diplomatic Dawn was a burning hulk drifting through space.
This is barbaric.
Commander Vextai snarled as she watched the systematic destruction of another Federation vessel.
They're not fighting according to any civilized rules of engagement. No, General Calthor replied grimly, they're fighting to win. The distinction was becoming increasingly clear as the battle progressed. The Federation fleet, trained in centuries of tradition that emphasized honor, individual heroism, and civilized conduct, found themselves completely unprepared for an enemy that viewed warfare as nothing more than the systematic application of violence to achieve strategic objectives.
Where Federation captains sought glorious single combat, the humans coordinated mass attacks.
Where Federation doctrine emphasized the protection of non-combatant vessels, the humans targeted command ships and supply vessels first. Where Federation rules of engagement prohibited certain weapons as too destructive for civilized warfare, the humans employed whatever tools were most effective regardless of tradition.
Sir, Lieutenant Zskak reported with growing desperation, we've lost 6 ships in the past 10 minutes. The humans are systematically destroying our fleet. Order all remaining vessels to fall back to defensive formation around the Harmony's edge, General Calthor commanded.
We need to reassess our tactical situation. But, even as he gave the order, he could see that the humans weren't going to allow them the luxury of regrouping. The enemy fleet was already adjusting its formation, moving to intercept the Federation vessels before they could establish defensive positions. General, Dr. Yuthera's voice carried a note of terrible realization, I don't think we're dealing with a primitive species that somehow developed advanced technology. I think we're dealing with a species that was already advanced and deliberately concealed their capabilities.
What do you mean? Look at their tactical coordination, their weapons technology, their strategic preparation.
This level of military sophistication doesn't develop in 6 months, or even 6 years.
They've been planning this engagement for decades, possibly generations.
They knew we would come, they knew how we would approach first contact, and they've been preparing specifically to counter our advantages. The implications of her words sent a chill through every being on the observation deck. It meant the humans hadn't been surprised by first contact, they had been expecting it. It meant their apparent primitive status had been an elaborate deception. It meant that somewhere in the depths of space, there might be an entire civilization of beings who viewed the Galactic Federation not as benevolent protectors bringing civilization to primitive worlds, but as potential enemies to be studied, understood, and ultimately defeated.
Sir! Lieutenant Zskak's voice cut through the general's dark thoughts. Incoming transmission from the human fleet.
The holographic display activated to show General Marcus Chen once again, but this time his image was broadcast from what was clearly the bridge of one of the human warships. Behind him, dozens of officers worked at control stations that looked disturbingly advanced for a species that was supposedly centuries behind Federation technology. General Calthor, the human said, his voice carrying across the observation deck with calm authority. You came to our world expecting to find primitives who would submit to superior force. Instead, you found warriors who refused to kneel to anyone. The human general's eyes seemed to look directly through the communication link, and General Calthor felt the uncomfortable sensation that he was being evaluated by someone who had already determined his weaknesses. Your fleet is destroyed, your ships are burning, and your people are dying. This is what happens when you mistake restraint for weakness, when you confuse civilization for submission. The human paused, and, when he spoke again, his voice carried a weight that made every alien in the observation deck take an involuntary step backward. Withdraw from our system immediately, or we will show you what humans do to those who threaten our home.
The transmission ended, leaving the observation deck in absolute silence.
Through the viewports, General Calthor could see the human fleet maintaining its aggressive formation, weapons still powered and ready to resume their devastating attack at a moment's notice. For the first time in his 3-century military career, General Calthor found himself facing an enemy that was not only willing to fight the Federation, but appeared to be capable of winning. And the most terrifying part was the growing realization that this might not even be humanity's full strength, it might just be what they were willing to reveal to make their point. He looked around the observation deck at the assembled representatives of a dozen different species, all of them staring in shock at the tactical displays showing the systematic destruction of Federation naval power. Each of them had come to witness what they expected to be a routine integration of another primitive world into galactic civilization. Instead, they had witnessed something that would haunt their dreams for years to come, the moment they realized that humanity had been watching them all along, learning their weaknesses, and preparing for war. General Calfor stood in silence for what felt like an eternity, staring at the tactical display that showed the scattered remains of what had once been the most powerful fleet in the Federation. Around him, the observation deck had become a tomb of shattered expectations and dying dreams of easy conquest.
"Sir," Lieutenant Zskek whispered, his compound eyes reflecting the red glow of emergency lighting, "what are your orders?" The question hung in the air like a death sentence. General Calfor had spent 3 centuries building a reputation as the Federation's most successful peacekeeping commander. He had brought 47 worlds into galactic civilization without firing a shot in anger. His diplomatic approach and overwhelming technological superiority had made warfare unnecessary, obsolete, a relic of primitive thinking. Now he was faced with a species that had rendered everything he knew about diplomacy and overwhelming force completely meaningless. "General," Dr. Yuthera's crystalline form chimed softly, "I'm receiving data streams from the human vessels. They're sending us technical specifications." "What kind of specifications?"
"Weapons systems, propulsion technology, defensive capabilities." Her form flickered with rapid analysis. "They're showing us exactly how they built everything we just witnessed. The kinetic weapons, the exotic particle beams, the coordinated tactical networks, they're giving us complete blueprints."
Commander Vextai's serpentine features twisted with confusion. Why would they reveal their technological advantages?
"That makes no strategic sense." Dr. Yuthera was quiet for a long moment as more data flowed through the transmission. When she spoke again, her voice carried a tremor that sent chills through every being present.
"Because it's not their technological advantage.
General, these weapons systems, they're all based on Federation technology. They took our own scientific databases, our own engineering principles, our own tactical doctrines, and improved them beyond anything we thought possible."
The implication struck General Calfor like a physical blow. "How long have they had access to our databases?"
"Unknown, but, based on the sophistication of their modifications." Dr. Yuthera paused, her calculations creating harmonic resonances in her crystalline structure.
"Decades.
Possibly since their first radio telescope detected Federation communications passing through their solar system."
"You're saying they've been listening to us for decades?"
"I'm saying they've been learning from us for decades. Every technological specification we've transmitted, every tactical manual we've broadcast, every diplomatic protocol we've used with other species, they've had access to all of it."
"They know more about Federation capabilities than most Federation officers do." Through the observation deck's viewports, the human fleet maintained its menacing formation, but now General Calfor could see them with new understanding.
These weren't primitive ships that had somehow achieved technological parity with the Federation. These were Federation ships that had been redesigned by minds that understood warfare in ways that the galaxy's peacekeeping forces had forgotten.
"Sir!" Lieutenant Zskek's voice cracked with stress. "I'm detecting additional contacts rising from the planet's surface. Hundreds of them." The tactical display updated to show wave after wave of human vessels emerging from concealed launch sites across Earth's surface.
But these weren't the warships they had already faced. These were something entirely different, sleek, fast-moving craft that moved with predatory grace through space.
"Fighters," General Calfor breathed. "They're launching fighter craft."
"No sir," Dr. Yuthera corrected, her analysis complete.
"Those aren't fighters. They're infiltration vessels.
Each one is designed to carry a small team directly into the heart of enemy ships." The meaning of her words sank in like ice water.
The humans weren't content to simply destroy the Federation fleet from a distance.
They were preparing to board enemy vessels, to take the fight directly to their opponents in the most personal and terrifying way possible. "General," Commander Vextai's voice was barely a whisper, "we need to withdraw immediately. If those infiltration craft reach our ships..."
She didn't need to finish the sentence. Everyone on the observation deck understood the implications.
Hand-to-hand combat aboard a starship was the stuff of nightmares, a scenario so terrifying that most species had developed specific protocols to prevent it from ever happening. The idea of alien boarders moving through the corridors of their vessels, hunting their crews through familiar spaces turned into battlefields, violated every principle of civilized warfare. "Sir," Lieutenant Zskek reported with mounting panic, "the human infiltration craft are moving faster than our computer models predicted.
At their current velocity, they'll reach our position in minutes."
General Calfor felt the weight of command settling on his shoulders like a burial shroud. Every tactical manual he had ever studied, every strategic principle he had ever learned, told him that the only logical course of action was immediate retreat. The Federation fleet was outnumbered, outgunned, and facing weapons systems they couldn't counter or even fully understand. But 3 centuries of military tradition and personal pride warred against tactical necessity. He was General Calfor, conqueror of 47 worlds, defender of galactic peace. He couldn't simply run from a primitive species that had gotten lucky with a few advanced weapons.
Could he?
The decision was made for him when the first human infiltration craft struck the Federation destroyer Swift Resolution. The impact wasn't the violent collision General Calfor had expected, but something far more unsettling, a precise docking maneuver that spoke of extensive training and preparation. "They're cutting through the hull," Captain Morthek of the Swift Resolution reported, his voice tight with fear. "Molecular disintegration tools, military-grade breach charges. They know exactly where to hit us for maximum tactical advantage." General Calfor watched the tactical display with growing horror as indicators showed human boarding parties moving through the Swift Resolution with methodical efficiency.
They weren't randomly searching the ship or fighting their way through corridors.
They were moving directly toward specific objectives: the bridge, engineering, weapons control.
"How do they know our ship layouts?" Commander Vextai demanded.
"Because they've been studying us," Dr. Yathara replied, her crystalline form resonating with what might have been admiration or terror.
"Every Federation vessel follows standardized design principles.
They've had decades to analyze our construction methods, our internal configurations, our tactical weaknesses." The communication system crackled to life with Captain Morthek's increasingly desperate reports.
"They're in engineering.
I don't know how they got past our security systems, but they've disabled our weapons and are working on the power core."
"How many of them are there?" General Calfor demanded.
6. Just 6 humans are taking apart a destroyer with a crew of 300. The observation deck fell silent except for the steady stream of tactical updates showing the systematic capture of a Federation warship by a boarding party that wouldn't have been large enough to crew a shuttle.
It was impossible. It was unthinkable. It was happening anyway.
"Bridge secured," Captain Morthek's voice was now barely a whisper.
They didn't kill anyone. They used some kind of non-lethal neural disruptors to incapacitate the crew. But, General, they're downloading everything from our computers.
Navigation charts, tactical databases, communication protocols, they're taking all of it. General Calfor realized with cold certainty that he was witnessing something that had never happened in the recorded history of galactic civilization, a technologically inferior species systematically defeating a superior force through nothing more than superior planning, superior training, and superior understanding of their enemy's weaknesses. "Sir," Lieutenant Zskek's voice carried a note of absolute terror, "I'm detecting similar boarding actions on 6 more of our vessels."
"The humans aren't trying to destroy our fleet, they're capturing it."
The tactical display updated to show the true scope of the human strategy. While their main fleet maintained defensive positions around Earth, their infiltration craft were methodically taking control of Federation vessels one by one. Not destroying them, not driving them away, but capturing them intact along with all their technology, databases, and strategic intelligence. "They're not just winning this battle," Dr. Yathara observed with growing horror.
"They're preparing for the next war.
Every ship they capture, every database they download, every tactical system they analyze, it all becomes part of their understanding of Federation capabilities." General Calfor felt the last vestiges of his confidence crumble as he realized the true scope of what they were facing.
The humans hadn't just been preparing to defend their homeworld.
They had been preparing to fight a war against the entire Galactic Federation, and they had been doing it for decades.
General, a new voice cut through the observation deck's stunned silence.
It was General Marcus Chen, but this time his transmission was coming from the bridge of the captured Swift Resolution. Behind him, human technicians worked at Federation control stations with casual efficiency that spoke of extensive training.
"I think it's time we had a more honest conversation," the human general said, his voice carrying across the observation deck with calm authority.
"You came to our world expecting to find primitives who would kneel before your technological superiority. Instead, you found a species that has spent 50 years preparing for this exact moment." The human's image shifted to show data streams flowing across multiple displays, Federation tactical manuals, strategic databases, communication protocols, all of it being analyzed and absorbed by human intelligence systems.
"You see, General Calfor, we've been listening to your communications since we first detected them in the 1970s. We know how the Federation operates, how it thinks, how it approaches species like us. We know about your 47 successful integrations, your diplomatic protocols, your peacekeeping traditions." The human paused, and, when he continued, his voice carried a weight that made every alien on the observation deck take an involuntary step backward. "What you don't know is that we've been preparing for this war since the moment we realized we weren't alone in the universe. Every human military officer has studied Federation tactics. Every human engineer has analyzed Federation technology. Every human strategic planner has wargamed scenarios exactly like this one." The implications struck General Calfor like a series of hammer blows. Not only had the humans been preparing for first contact, they had been preparing specifically for hostile first contact. They had assumed from the beginning that any advanced species they encountered would be a potential enemy, and they had spent half a century preparing to fight and defeat them. "So here's what's going to happen," General Chen continued, his words cutting through the observation deck like knives. "You're going to return to Federation space, and you're going to tell them exactly what you witnessed here. You're going to tell them that humanity is not interested in joining your galactic community. You're going to tell them that any attempt to force our integration will result in the systematic destruction of every Federation vessel that enters our space." The human general's eyes seemed to look directly at General Calfor through the communication link. "And you're going to tell them that if they want to avoid a war that will devastate both our civilizations, they need to treat humanity as an equal power, not as primitives to be conquered or integrated." The transmission ended, leaving the observation deck in absolute silence. General Calfor stared at the empty holographic display, processing the fact that in less than 6 hours, everything he thought he knew about warfare, diplomacy, and galactic civilization had been proved completely wrong. "Sir," Lieutenant ZSS Keck whispered, "your orders?" General Calfor looked around the observation deck at the assembled representatives of the Galactic Federation. Each of them had come to witness what they expected to be a routine demonstration of superior force. Instead, they had witnessed the birth of a new kind of warfare, fought by a species that had turned the Federation's own advantages against them. "Signal the fleet," he said quietly. "We're withdrawing from this system." "Sir?" Commander Vextai's voice carried disbelief. "We're retreating?" "No," General Calfor replied, his voice carrying the weight of 3 centuries of military experience and the bitter taste of absolute defeat. "We're running. And, when we get back to Federation space, we're going to tell them that everything we thought we knew about primitive species was wrong." He turned to look one last time at the blue world spinning peacefully below, now knowing that beneath its serene appearance lay a civilization that had been watching, learning, and preparing for war since before most of the Federation's member species had achieved spaceflight. "We're going to tell them," he continued, his voice barely above a whisper, "that humanity isn't primitive at all. They're just patient. And the most terrifying part is that we still don't know what they're really capable of." As the Harmony's Edge began its long journey back to Federation space, General Calfor couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning. Somewhere behind them, on that small blue world, an entire species was already planning their next move in a war that most of the galaxy didn't even know had started. And, for the first time in his long military career, General Calfor found himself genuinely afraid of what that species might do next.